Okay. Right, I'm going to kick us off. So just start off with welcome. Happy Tuesday. Hope everyone here in the UK has had a wonderful bank holiday. I think there was bank holiday in the States as well. So if you've got anyone over there, I hope you had one nice one too. On the screen at the moment, you should be able to see the fundraising Us and Us support URL. We're putting all the slides, recordings, recaps at that link. So do take a note of it. Even if you have to leave at some point during this session, we will get around to getting the slides and stuff up there, so you'll be able to come back to the session. We've had loads of good sessions. This is actually our 7th session. So we've covered quite a lot of topics, but we've also got available on there 2 key offerings at the moment. One from fundraising, which is free fundraising website builds, and we've also got Massive offering 2-hour strategy consultations. Sorry, both of which should help you if you're trying to still kind of make the most of virtual fundraising or digital fundraising. Okay, so yeah, anyway, welcome to Empowering Supporters with Social webinar. For those of you who are familiar with the Us and Us Collective, we are a community, and we see things as, this is a time for charities and the related sectors like events and tech and that to come together and be supporting each other. And we've been delighted so far to have some wonderful charities on board, as well as some fantastic experts talking about DRTV, virtual fundraising, supporter care, invigorating tribes, and we had a great Q&A session that fielded about 70+ questions, and we had Emily from Massive who really kind of condensed that into kind of 6 major themes. So we've seen some amazing insight over the past 6 sessions. These sessions really come alive with your questions, so please do make sure that you submit your questions to the question and answer tab. It's at the bottom of your screen, and feel free to use the chat window as well. But just don't hold back. Especially because of the theme of this session about social media, and everyone uses social media differently. I think the goal is obviously to drive your engagement up, to help your supporters advocate for you, and to really get your fundraising and your supporter base activated and kind of advocating there in your kind of online groups. So put your cases in there. Tell us what you're doing, and the team can start kind of addressing your exact needs. So if everyone can introduce themselves. Teresa, can you say hi?
Hiya, I'm Teresa Lita from Lightful. I'm really happy to be here.
Oh, sorry, I need to spotlight you. Say hi again.
Hi,
yeah.
I'm Teresa Lita from Lightful. Happy to be here.
Great. And Sarah?
Morning, everyone. My name's Sarah Pickersgill. I'm from Cancer Research UK, and I'm going to talk to you about Raise for Life at Home.
Good. And Emily?
And hi, I'm Emily Clayton. I'm the Marketing Director at Massive, and part of the Us and Us Collective, and I am going to be taking all of your questions and answers today. We'll either be, as Brendan said, asking them as they come in, or I will hold them to the end, so do please send them in on the Q&A tab.
Wicked. Okay. All right, so I'm going to hand over control now to Teresa. So have you got that, Teresa?
Let me see. Yeah, I think so.
Cool. All right. Hang on a sec. Let me just spotlight you. There we go. Okay, go for it.
Perfect. Thanks, Brennan. Hi again, everyone. My name is Teresa Lita. I'm a social media and content marketing manager at Lightful, and we'll talk today on how to make the most of social media during this strange situation. I'm working for Lightful. It's a tech for good company, and there's a social media tool for charities and also digital capacity building and offering digital software solutions. And working as a social media manager for almost 3 years now, it's always the challenge and the opportunities to actually make the most of it. when you're working with charities and also when you're trying to help charities in this journey. So today we'll talk about social media and how to adjust your strategy and your practices during COVID-19 and everything that entails. We know probably from our personal use that we have increased our screen time the last 2 months and we're still trying to figure out what's happening. And it's interesting to start seeing the first research, the reports that this one is, for example, from Nielsen data that says that there was a 4% increase on the use of social media from January to April. And this was mostly tracking March and a little bit of the beginning from April. So as you can imagine, this must have increased even more. And it makes sense because everyone is spending more time on the screens. And there is the question, how can we make the most of it right now? And we know already that everything is going virtual. We have to survive and we need to adjust to the new situation. Everything from fundraising, service delivery, comms, the well-being, that is also another adjustment on having too many calls, and also the community building. So there are so many aspects that we feel that there is a whole new world and we have to really jump on it if we want to make the most of it. So we're going to look at some quick wins on how to improve your social media presence, or the things to look at if you haven't done so, or the things you want to improve in the future. So how can you improve, first of all, your current social media presence? A good start is to review your social media channels. Have a look at how they're performing and the channels that work best for you. You can start by analyzing some key metrics based on your objectives and see what your engagement is like from one channel to another. Then based on the stats, and it's not just about the numbers, it's also about the performance, the mentions, the channels that are actually more active, it's time to look at the strategy and have a look and think, how can I make some quick changes that can really make my presence more relevant? We know that everything has changed the last 2 months, and if you had a plan, a strategy, or even a content calendar in mind, then it needs to be adjusted. So have a think, what were your plans earlier this year and how can you really be more relevant right now? It doesn't have to be something very complicated in terms of the time you can spend, but it can actually be very useful if you have a think of your next goals. And then make sure you focus on your active channels. Start thinking, how can I make the most of my time without feeling overwhelmed and jumping on every channel? So for example, if you're more active on Facebook and your supporters are there, then you can just focus on Facebook or maybe another channel. You don't necessarily need to feel that I need to be on every social media channel because everyone must be somewhere. So try to spend your time more wisely and don't feel bad if you're not on every channel. It's better to be on the ones that your supporters are there. Then start thinking of new ideas. The first idea is to listen to your supporters. It's very important and it's probably the best time to do that because you want to understand how your supporters feel and actually what they really want from you. So in this case, social listening can really help, and there are many tools and also free ones to help you monitor the sentiment and the keywords that make more sense for your organization. Or you can track the mentions and see what they're talking about you and your organization. So this way, even by having a quick look at this, you can understand your supporters more. You can find out more about their concerns and adjust your content accordingly. Then you want to find inspiration. You want to think, how can I adjust my content to be more relevant? It's something that nobody had any idea in the beginning how to adjust because it was a new situation. But it's very useful in this case to have a look at what others are doing. You don't need to necessarily steal an idea straight in, but you can get the inspiration to see, oh, that's actually a good idea to use a GIF to share information, or I can share a quick video with my supporters and the volunteers to actually be more personal. So there are always new opportunities, and luckily by looking at other channels and other organizations, we can just update their content calendar. And talking about content calendar, it's probably a good idea to have some plan in mind. But we know that things change quite fast right now. So it's not really working to think, for example, for the next month, because who knows what's happening next month. So it's good to have a plan and make sure that you do review it probably every week to see that if it's still relevant, if there's something you need to change, or even if you need to pause your posts if something big is happening. And then the next stage, once you review your strategy and you organize your content calendar, you want to make sure that you find a way to empower your supporters. It's not just about you right now. All your content and everything you're getting out of your channels has to be about your supporters. So how can you make sure that your supporters are feeling more involved and they're feeling part of this journey? And this is where we're talking about having a social media toolkit and how to make it part of your campaign strategy. So when we're thinking of a social media toolkit, there are many reasons to consider having one. First of all, it's good to have one in terms of making it easier and quicker for someone to support you. If they want to support your campaign or your emergency appeal right now, they want to find many details, but it's not always easy for them to think the type of post and messaging that they want to share. And when it comes to the messaging, it's also good about the brand consistency. If you have a message in mind, then you can just help them and provide some guidelines and creative ideas on the things that they can share. And then, of course, having a social media toolkit, you also help your supporters feel empowered. It's all about the community building and making sure that you provide the right tools to feel that they can support you even more. So how can you create a social media toolkit and what does it look like? This can be very different for every organization, but it's also good to remember that it doesn't have to be something very complicated. I've seen many toolkits from charities that are just one page, a Word document, and you just include the tweets, some examples of sample posts, and just some details about your campaign. But you can still have it as a PDF if you want to share more, or you can just create a very simple version on your own. And you just mention more details about your campaign, the channels that you're active, and how someone can support you. And when you want to have more details, you need to think of the brand guidelines. If someone wants to share some images or something about your organization, how can they have the right idea of what is considered on brand for your user-generated content? This way, it's easier for you and you make sure that you do have the consistency that you want for your organization. Of course, you can share all the campaign details, and someone who might not really know about your campaign and what you're doing right now, they might get a great idea just by reading one page. And you can also provide draft social media posts, because we've seen in the past that many people want to support you. They might be friends, family, and anyone in your network, but they don't always feel they have the time or the creativity to create their own posts. So this way you can just make it as easy for everyone as possible and have all the information needed in one page. And if you do have some visual assets, anything creative that you want to share, you can still include a link. It might be a Drive folder or anything that's shareable, so that someone who wants to really support you can find everything they want in one place. And we've created for our campaign Reclaim Social in January a social media toolkit. And it was the first time that it was more organized as a PDF, so that we provide more details. And we found out that it was very useful to share it with our partners, our friends, and everyone in our network. Because if someone didn't really know about the campaign, it was a great way to have a quick introduction without getting into too many details. So it was visual, it had all the draft posts and all the details and the creative assets, so that someone who wants to join, they can really find everything they want. And it was way easier for everyone to support the campaign. And it was also making the whole ask for the campaign fun and appealing. So it was really nice, actually, when sharing the toolkit, to see all the messages from different people in charities all over the world who found the toolkit, they found the information, and they used the assets to talk about Reclaim Social. And it's also really interesting when you're monitoring during your campaign about the performance, to have a look at the posts or the hashtag that you might be using and see how everyone is really joining your campaign. And it's also fun when you do recognize the messaging. There might be some draft posts that you have in mind and how someone is really joining and just making part of it. And then after thinking of the quick wins and pretty much how to adjust during COVID-19 as the phase one, it's also useful to start thinking of the next phase. And this could be right now, if you've already been in phase one, or it could be in a few months' time. But it's really important to have some sort of idea of what's coming up and how you can really make the most of social media for the next stages. So when we're thinking of social media and what's next, it's good to start thinking of some tactics for the next few months. And we know that it's really hard to actually predict something right now, but even if some very draft plan, it's still useful to have it in mind. So how can you continue to be relevant? How can you think of new content opportunities for the next few months, possibly empowering your supporters again and make them feel involved, and make sure that you do stay consistent and helpful with your content? And it's also really important, you can use all the learnings from phase one, what worked, what can be improved, or the channels that work best for you in order to be even more effective with your social media presence. And when we're thinking about community building and actually thinking ahead, we need to remember that social media can also be about the long-term value. Now that we're all moving to be more digital, we know that our social media channels are kind of like our shop front. So this way we want to make sure that we stay consistent and that we do have all the right information to appeal to our supporters. And again, the long-term value of investing in social, what do we really mean about that? First of all, it's important to invest in social media, and by investing, it might be just putting your time on that, because we know that we need to go where our supporters are. If we see that there's an increasing number of supporters spending more time on Instagram, then it might be an opportunity to consider trying it even more and having it part of your strategy. And this way we feel that we know where our supporters are and what they really want from us. So it's good to keep an eye on what's changing in the trends to make sure we stay relevant. Then we also want to build meaningful relationships. Whether it's a Facebook group or any other idea of a community, social media can really help you in the long term. You start understanding more what they think, what they want from you, and how you can move them from the stage of awareness to find out more about you towards becoming your best supporters, whether it's a fundraising campaign or being great advocates on everything that you're doing. And when we're thinking of the long-term value, it's also important to have some sort of diversity on your channels. If you think of it, different channels can lead to different opportunities. Someone who is on Facebook might not necessarily be on LinkedIn, and vice versa. So even if you don't necessarily spend too much time on every channel, you need to think that every channel can lead to a new opportunity. And that can also be part both of organic and paid social. So when we're thinking of community building and the next steps, think how social media can really help you build meaningful connections with your supporters. It can help you to listen to what they're saying. And this is very important right now because we really want to know what our supporters think and what they really want from us. It can really be a great opportunity to engage with them on a regular basis to make sure that you do understand what they want and how you can really help them. So you hear their conversations and you know that this is what I need to create for my content from now on. And also you can test new ways to make your community digital. It might be a great opportunity right now to explore new tactics or new channels to make sure that you stay more relevant with your content. So if we have to think of one takeaway from everything we've discussed, it's important right now to think of the next stage. We really want to make sure we make the most of social media during COVID-19 and also the near and possibly longer future, because we know that digital channels will be more important from now on. Right after having the phase that we just had to react in a quick way, it's more about the recovery now. It's more about thinking ahead and what are the quick ways to be more digital focused? How can we make sure that our team understands more of the opportunities right now in order to focus on building a loyal community and aiming for long-term value? So have a look at exploring new virtual opportunities and see what there is a channel or a tactic or a new type of content to make sure that you can make the most of the time right now. I think that's my last slide. Yes, thank you very much. And it's time for Sarah.
Thank you very much for that. Thanks, Brendan. I've got someone else doing my slides because, you know, why not? So my name is, as I mentioned, Sarah. I'm from Cancer Research UK, and I am the head of events marketing, fundraising products and marketing services. And so Race for Life is one of the areas that I look after. So Brendan, if you could skip on, please. Thank you. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, Race for Life is a national campaign of events. And so there's around 400 around the country, sort of all over the country. And so there are 5K, a 10K, or a Pretty Muddy, or Pretty Muddy for children. And so we run these in the, oh, I'm going to get rid of something. We run these between May and kind of sort of July, August kind of time. And so this year we're all ready to go. We'd started our advertising in January to get some sign-ups. It was going really, really well. And obviously COVID hit. And so as of mid-Feb, we decided to move back the events. And so we've managed to rebook most of them later in the year. So that's great, you know, great on the events team for managing to get that done. But I suppose the question is, what are we going to do till the events happen? So we're very much about the event series itself. So this was a really sort of new challenge to us. So, you know, where do we go from here? So I had a great challenge from a couple of our directors to say Race for Life is a really good brand. It's going to be really easy to do some kind of online engagement. Yeah, okay, fine, good. Totally agree, but, you know, scared the living daylights out of us. So, as I said, what were we going to do till the events happen? So, thinking about some kind of online presence, we sort of panicked slightly and then sort of tried to calm ourselves down to work out what process we should go through to realise and work out what we should be doing. So, firstly, why? I've mentioned that, as you can see on this slide. Who? And so we already had quite a volume of people sign up to our event series anyway. And so did we want to do some kind of Facebook online presence for those people? Or also did we actually just want it to be for people that hadn't signed up yet? So after quite a lot of discussion, we decided that unsurprisingly it's for anyone. Yeah. And so how? So what would this online presence look like? What, you know, how we're going to achieve it? And so, yeah, of course, it's going to be something social media. The phrase, let's do it on social, always sounds really easy until you actually sort of, you know, start planning it. And so which platform is the first question. So we've got a really large Facebook presence. We've got, you know, thousands of people that like us on social. But as we know, due to algorithms and things like that, we wouldn't be able to speak to all of them. So we've decided that we wanted to enable some kind of, you know, more specific conversation, be able people to talk to each other and encourage each other. And so we decided to do a Facebook group. Now, luckily, we'd already tested the concept a few months beforehand with our Walk All Over Cancer series. And so, yeah, so we tried a Facebook group for Walk All Over Cancer. So people that don't know what that is, it's a 4-week challenge of 10,000 steps a day, and everyone does it in the same period. And so you know, we tried Facebook groups before, but to be honest, those people were all doing the same challenge at the same time. And so we had good engagement in that group, and they were really great at encouraging each other. But then we thought, well, how will this be? What is Facebook going to, so what is Race for Life at Home going to be, and how will people talk to each other and encourage themselves? So anyway, after we decided it was going to be the Facebook group, we then went into the question of how would people sign up. So there was a really, really long conversation about this, about whether or not, if someone had already entered, then would we put them straight into the group? Would we ask people to sign up again? Did we want to put them straight into the Facebook group, or did we want to data capture? So we went through a whole big process around that. And so in the end, we decided that we would ask people that had already signed up to come and join this new group. I keep saying my group. So they signed up via a form. We got their information, and once they'd signed up, we then sent them the invite to join the Facebook group itself. And so we've got distinct people that have signed up, people that have joined the group, and everyone that signed up hasn't yet joined the Facebook group, so we need to work out how we're going to communicate with those guys. And then the what. So yeah, we've got them into this Facebook group, great. So what are we actually asking them to do? Now this is the bit that we got a little bit caught up on. And so the events themselves are 5K and 10K, etc. And as of last year, we allowed men to take part. And so are we asking them to join this Facebook group and do a 5K? Are we asking them to do something? you know, what was the sort of the key to getting them to join? And so we really, we struggled with this and we hesitated launching this group. We went to the effort of getting some talent involved as well. So we had 4 or 5 live feeds planned with some talent, which was really good. We thought this could be the hook to get them into the group, but actually, is that enough? And so it took us sort of 3 or 4 weeks before we decided to launch a group. And so in the end, we just sort of launched it. And so once we'd launched it, then the question of, is it about raising money? Is it about engagement? What are we actually trying to get to? And so we actually asked them initially to just donate as they were doing something for us. But then we found as we went on, people were wanting to set up online fundraising pages and raise money for us. So I suppose in the end, the group has become a bit more about raising money than we'd started with initially, which obviously is a huge bonus. You know, we're not going to say no to that. Brendan, would you skip on to the next slide, please? So in summary, we've now got about 6,000 people in this Facebook group for Raise for Life at Home. This is a sort of a sample of some of the posts that we've had. So my comment around whether or not people would do a 5K or not. So if you look at the top left, if someone has done a 5K, then we've got next to that, we've got some people that have done some kind of sports day stuff in their garden. Then we've got someone that's done a cycle. Then we've got a guy that's done some running. Then we've got a wonderful elderly lady at the bottom that's done 80,000 steps. So in the end, we found that people were doing what they wanted to do. The kind of messages and the comments, they were encouraging each other, but also really talking about some of the great stories that makes up Race for Life as a concept. So you can see that this large comment I put on here. So one of the people talking about some cancer experience they've had. So we found that the group itself has really been self-sustaining, and people have been really happy to sort of encourage each other and chat and, you know, really get on. So we've been really pleased with that engagement we've got. And then the live feed we've done with talent, all for free, have gone down really well as kind of a added content stream, as opposed to just leaving people to chat to each other. So Brendan, if you could skip on, please. So in a nutshell, what have I learned? So stop talking about it and get on with it. Exactly that. We talked to ourselves in circles about what the group was going to be. So I think I probably would have launched a bit earlier. So I would really push that. The first post sign up communication is key. So because this group is a bit different to what Race for Life normally is, we found that when people were happy to sign up, they were happy to join the Facebook group, but we did have some people going, well, what now? And so we found that first communication, once people have joined the group, was really, really important. And we made it a bit quicker than it was before. So it was a 24-hour delay, but now we managed to get it out there really, a lot quicker. And I suppose just looking at what happens in the Facebook group, because they will say if they're not happy, and then people will agree or disagree. So that was really useful. There isn't a wrong way of doing anything. We were crippled by the thought of, well, what if we don't do it right? But I think, you know, with COVID in mind and everything else, I think you just have to try things and worry less about the fact you might not do it right, because I don't think there is a right way of doing anything. Be clear what you're aiming to achieve. Again, we hesitated a bit up front about whether or not it's engagement or income, but just have a really clear idea of what you're trying to get to. And then if you need to pivot once you get going, that's all fine. Communicate well to the organisation. So Cancer Research UK was really great at supporting this. We had lots of teams that were willing to help us with it, with content, with tech, with anything else. So I suppose just be really clear that you're talking to people about it and keeping them involved, so they don't see something and then surprised about where it's come from and why you're doing it. And then just on the social resource, as you can imagine, this is quite resource heavy for social media team. And so you really do want to do some community management and things like that. So just make sure you've got enough resource allocated to it. Otherwise, because you don't want it to sort of fall down, you need to make sure that your brand has got presence in the conversation as well. Yeah, so that's it really. That's Race for Life at Home. And now I'm going to hand over to Emily.
Thanks, Sarah. We've got a couple of questions already that have come through, so don't relax too much, Sarah. They are largely for you. The first one is from Rebecca Scott, who's asked, do you think that opening it up too much to let supporters decide what to do caused some confusion rather than sticking to your USP of 5 and 10K, or do you think that actually worked well for you?
I think the confusion came when initially joining as to what you should be doing. So there was a volume of people that were so used to Race for Life that they knew it was a 5 and 10K, but with the best one in the world, most people wouldn't really know that. So I think in the end, keeping it quite open has been a plus, because it's allowed people to do what they want, because as we know, not everyone wants to run or walk. So cycling or hula hooping or, you know, anything like that is all good. So once you've got your initial setup correct, I think leaving it open has been great.
Great, thank you. And then a question from Karen Bolton. How have you managed expectations from senior staff around how much income can be raised, i.e. a new virtual event may not replace income that would have been raised from the live event? I guess how have you sort of forecasted what it might bring in?
Yeah, so we kind of haven't, which is unheard of. We were very, well, no, we've never been asked for it to replace the income for Race, because we are planning to do the events later in the year anyway. And so this was really, as I said, it started as an engagement tool. And because we had no clue about how this was going to go, and because we haven't spent a huge amount of money on it, we've been allowed to sort of test it and see what happens. So I understand normally that pressure does come in, but if we were committing hundreds of thousands of pounds to it, but we haven't done that in this instance. So it's just been test and learn as we go.
Great, thanks. And there's just one, it's a bit of clarification. So you said that you invited existing participants who'd already signed up this year to the Facebook group, but those who hadn't yet, what was the process to get them to be part of the campaign? Were they already followers of kind of Race for Life on social anyway?
So we did a past participant communication to anyone that had done Race in the last however many years, obviously according GDPR compliant. We also did some paid for advertising, a small amount, and then also we did it on our own channels. So we promoted it on the Race for Life Facebook, Cancer Research UK Facebook, and any other Facebook groups we could get our hands on. So it was a mixture.
Great, thank you. We've also had a question from Danielle Byrne. She's asked, do the Race for Life participants receive a fundraising pack and stewardship emails, or is that all done on the Facebook group?
They don't receive a fundraising pack. So I suppose this is kind of the tricky bit. So if people have signed up to the event, they would get the pack as normal. And then they'd get the accompanying communications as normal. But because the events aren't now, they're not getting loads of that. But they would have had an online fundraising page when they signed up to Race. So then the people in the Facebook group are only getting the communications in the group itself. And then we're sending them an email every week with updates and, you know, any live broadcasts that are coming or anything like that. So they're kind of two separate journeys.
Okay, thanks. And then Catherine Miles asks, do you know what proportion of people on the group are donating or raising money already? And then second to that, will you then ask group members to do the physical events later in 2020 if they're not ones that have already signed up?
We have an idea of how many people are giving from the group. Because we didn't offer fundraising pages when we first set up the group, and then people asked for them, they've been going off to use Just Giving in other areas, which is obviously wonderful. But now we are now offering an online fundraising page, so we've got a bit better understanding of anyone that now joins, whether or not they're fundraising or not. And the second question, what was the second?
Whether so those who have joined the Race for Life at Home group, if they haven't signed up to a physical event, will you be asking them to do that later?
Absolutely, yeah. Yes. Be mad not to, wouldn't you? But yes, we will be.
Great, thank you. You have a few more questions, Teresa. I'm going to open some of these up to you as well. So, if one of the charities don't have a strong social following already, what's your advice on how to make that stronger, particularly around either low levels of engagement or driving group fundraising? How do you kind of get people on board?
think that's a really good question, and it's quite common now that how to get started on social media. I think it's important to try and do some sort of cross promotion. So whether that's an email or any other channels you'll be using up to now, try to make sure that you mention that you're active on Facebook, for example, if it's a Facebook group or something else. So new ways for someone to follow you or keep an eye on virtual events so that they do know that you're active online and they start gradually following to see the social updates that you're doing from now on.
Great, thanks. Just another question that's come in from Catherine following on, so not just about social really, but quite a big question. How confident are we that participants are going to feel comfortable doing a physical Race for Life event this autumn? So I guess, Sarah, has there been any insight that's come through from the Facebook group of people talking about doing the physical events?
No, we haven't got that far yet. So as you can imagine, Cancer Research UK is heavily relying on any government advice, and we'll be following any advice we're given. We haven't got into that stage yet. It's quite a way away for the event, so we haven't planned them again till August, September, and October. So, you know, it's a good few months yet. I suppose when we get to the point of advertising them, I think we'll probably get to that question, but that's not quite yet either.
And I guess you've got a really engaged group of people that you can start asking those questions to now, which is brilliant.
Yeah, of course. We did do some insight work on this group before we launched it. We did. We've got an internal panel of existing supporters, so we did run the idea of Race for Life at home past them to make sure it wasn't horrifically off tone or anything like that.
Great. Thanks. You've also just answered a question from Natasha there about when you're moving the events to. A couple more around kind of social and particularly around the skills. So if a charity doesn't have enough digital skills in-house, and I know Sarah, you obviously mentioned that there is quite a lot of resource goes into this, how can that be countered? And I guess particularly Teresa, do you have any advice on that?
Yeah, I think it's obviously a very big issue and we see more of that lately. I think the good thing is that I'm seeing more resources lately and digital trainings moving online at a very low cost. So this is a very good thing to notice in the sector, that whether it's free or like some conferences at a very low rate, it's probably a good time right now to kind of like brush up the skills and see what's happening.
Excellent, thank you. And Sarah, you mentioned in there that Race for Life is now open to everyone and men can take part as well. Have you seen has that kind of made a difference to the group, do you think? What's the sort of split between male and female supporters?
The Facebook group is mostly women still, but there is definitely an element of guys in there. So there's a few regular posters in there that the particular guy I've got in mind that runs every day, and we'll share that. So I think the real push around more than just allowing men to enter was the family aspect of it. So there is a lot of family activity on there as well. So sort of groups of people doing running, or as I mentioned, there's a sports day example and things like that in there. So it has just opened it up and allowed it to be a lot more laid back than just perhaps sticking to the 5K and just sticking to women only.
Great. And what has been, I mean, I've been following the group. I'm part of the group, obviously, and have been following it a lot. I've been really impressed with, like you mentioned, the kind of how much people are supporting each other and talking to each other on that. Has there had to be much kind of push from your side or from the social team to get that going, or has that come about naturally?
No, that has come about naturally. So I think that's the thing that I was worried about. So as I mentioned, that we were hesitating because we didn't know that would happen. So as I mentioned in the Walk All Over Cancer group, it was very natural, but because everyone was doing it at the same time in the same month, it's natural it would work because everyone was at the same point. So for us, we were like, well, you know, will that happen? But yeah, people have absolutely got on board, really supporting each other. When a new person comes in, they might say, oh, can you give me any ideas? And people will come in with lots of different ways of doing things. So we've, like, Cancer Research UK has been there more definitely as a support as opposed to running it. So it's been really wonderful, better than we could have even imagined.
Great. So I guess just some concerns that often pop up around groups and social media. First of all, there's a lot of campaigns that have been driven by social at the moment, particularly from a giving point of view. So obviously Tom Moore, the 2.6 Challenge, all of the NHS giving campaigns. Are either of you worried about kind of giving fatigue around social media and where that might lead to?
I suppose there's a general concern about giving fatigue generally, not just social. I suppose we've got to see how the financial situation, recession coming and things like that. So I suppose I wouldn't personally say that I'm any more worried about social than I am the giving market generally. Obviously that's an awful statement in itself, but I think we need to look at the whole market, as it were.
What about you, Teresa? Have you seen any, you know, you've probably got more sight of how many campaigns are out there at the moment. What's your feeling on that?
There's certainly a lot of campaigns, and it makes sense to try and have your giving campaign live right now. And I feel there will probably be a time, probably quite soon, that we feel that fatigue from both sides really. And it's probably the time to try and calm down and see like, what's the next step and how can I really adjust to the situation and plan for the next stages.
Okay. And then another question that comes up around these kind of campaigns is around data. Do you think people need to be worried at all about data exploitation when using social, and particularly when they're not, I guess, being as monitored as closely as perhaps some other social campaigns that would be run? How, like, what would you say to people who might be concerned about that? Teresa?
Well, that's a big question, and I don't think anyone has the perfect answer. And I think it's also tricky in the sense that GDPR is not working in the same way on social media compared to the emails where you have a very clear consent. So there's not really a clear answer to that. It's more about try to work with your own sense really, because nobody really has a clear guidance on how to avoid the data exploitation, because we hear so many things that can get us worried. But this doesn't necessarily mean that you should be out of social media for the fear of having issues.
Okay, thank you. And then how do you recommend optimizing social posts to make sure that they are achieving cut through in the, you know, in this busy market that we've been talking about?
With me, Sarah?
Either of you, if you've got any views on that.
Teresa, after you, I'll make it up while you speak.
I think it's more about keeping an eye on the best practices, because there's no perfect formula for every channel. It's more about having a look at the others, what's working. So I really like stalking other accounts, the ones that work really well. And you see, for example, oh, I see that GIFs on Twitter work really well, or videos on Facebook and Instagram tend to have more engagement. So it's more like test and learn and have some looks on what's working better for your organization.
Okay.
I do have an answer.
Can I sneak in? Just out of curiosity, would you say, and this is definitely open to both of you, would you say it's better to test your own stuff and, you know, like try using GIFs or try using video or try using images, for instance, or is it better to like follow like, you know, kind of rival or similar organizations and kind of do a copycat method?
I was going to say just about testing. I don't think copycat, you can really do that because your audience might be different, or your ask might be different, or your whatever might be different. So for me, it's just testing continuously, really being clear on your audience and making sure that you're understanding enough that you can try ads that get different types of people. So you might have a rational ad, you might have an emotional ad, you might have a whatever. And obviously I know it depends on the costs and the amount of money you've got for it, but I don't think you can really you can over test because you don't make any money at all, but be really clear with your testing plan. And then even when you run the same thing again, you've still got to retest because the time period would be different, and therefore everything you knew from last time might have changed. So for me, it's always just really trying new things.
And also look at your previous posts sometimes, because you might have some very successful posts or types of content. So get from your success in the past and try to improve that.
Yeah, it's interesting because at the core of both of those is the idea of directing things to the right groups of people. Would you say that the right thing to have is these persona definitions?
Yes, for sure.
Would you have any advice on how to group your supporters?
I suppose every type of offering, you'd have a persona for it, wouldn't you? So a Race for Life person is not going to be the same as a legacy inquirer, as anything else. So I suppose the people that, you know, if you own your particular product area, you need to understand your supporters. So obviously you just look at what they've analysed them, seeing what the patterns are, and sort of take it from there, I'd say. So look back on what you've got, and if you're going to change who you're going for, then that will be reflected in the creative as well, as you would for any channel.
Very much. Thank you, Emily, for letting me bump in.
That's quite right. An interesting question that's come out, especially after maybe some of the posts that went up on Twitter yesterday and came down very quickly. What's the biggest social mistakes that you've seen made?
Well, I suppose, yeah, the one on Saturday, the government one, I'm not going to comment either way whether or not that was right or not, because I'm not going to get into my politics on here. But I suppose that's an interesting one, that social media managers have got so much power that they could say anything depending on what kind of, you know, mood they're in, I suppose. So I suppose I haven't seen anything really bad, because it gets taken down so quickly, doesn't it? So I suppose the one on Saturday is probably the front one for me.
Yeah, it's definitely a great example.
Great.
Spelling the product name wrong, you know, yeah. But that's just a typo, a minor thing. So I've not seen anything like illegal or anything like that.
Okay. And then, you know, a question that always comes up, and I know can be really difficult to answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. How do you measure ROI on general social engagement, and what kind of ROI are you looking for?
So I suppose on engagement is a $64,000 question. In this instance, because we've now got fundraising in aspect, we can do ROI from the point of what advertising we've spent to get new people to sign up to the group versus how much money's been raised. So, but for engagement, I would be pleased to know the answer to that. Anyone has it?
Teresa, do you have it?
Well, it's always a tricky question, isn't it? I think with the engagement, it's more about keeping an eye on the numbers and set some sort of benchmarking for your own performance. But obviously, when it comes to fundraising, it's way easier, rather than convincing your senior stakeholders about the engagement and what counts as ROI.
We know, obviously there's tracking, if you look at engagement as a whole and brand awareness and things like that, but again, I wouldn't be able to pin it down to just social engagement.
Yeah. And then I guess final question for me, for Sarah in particular, is, you know, what you've talked about today is that the Race for Life at Home group came around pretty quickly, and you were able to jump on it really quickly. Do you now have longer term plans for it, or are you kind of just going with it and seeing what organically happens?
Yeah, we at the minute we're just kind of going with it, because we've still been testing a lot of things, and so as I mentioned, the live streams and things like that, we've got to kind of see where we are at the end of that, and, you know, decide how to move forward. I think presume, you know, if the events still go ahead later on in the year, which obviously we're planning they are, we'll highlight what we do or don't do with Race for Life at Home, I think.
Yeah.
So I imagine it will be here for some time, but again, I don't know what's happening next week, let alone, you know, in a couple of months' time. But we'll wait and see how the rest of the year pans out before we go into any major long-term plans.
Great, thank you. Then I guess just one more question. We, you know, everything, well, a lot of what you've been talking about today in particular, Sarah, has been around Facebook. Do you, and would you consider LinkedIn social? Is that something that you do a lot with, Teresa? And if so, is there any success with that?
But Sarah, I mean,
either of you, I don't know if either of you got experience of using LinkedIn social, whether that's, you know, I guess whether the corporate audience is different, and whether there's been any successes.
I think LinkedIn is definitely different in terms of the audience. As you've said, it's more about the corporates and any partnerships you might be having. So if you feel that it's still relevant and you have something to talk about, then it's definitely useful. It's more about knowing your audience and whether it makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't done much in the way of LinkedIn social, so I will defer to Teresa on that.
I could give a little bit of thought. So I've done some experimenting on LinkedIn myself, in both a charity context and a charity-facing context. There's I found that LinkedIn tends to have a higher engagement rate in terms of content, and that actually there's an awful lot of room for success on LinkedIn. But we've also, as Teresa said, it's entirely about whether it's relevant to that audience and whether the corporate world is the right place for your message. Talking about, you know, it's a fantastic place for word of mouth style social. So if you are doing something like we are today, where you've got a webinar and you've got people who are involved, and you can say, you know, thank you so much to Sarah and Teresa for coming on board with our webinar today. That's the sort of thing which does sit well on LinkedIn. But actually, what wouldn't sit well is just a random kind of bland thank you to our fundraisers post, because that's the sort of thing which doesn't actually drive engagement very well on LinkedIn. And so I don't know whether that's directly relevant to any of your audiences, but that's my understanding. And I think in terms of LinkedIn ads, I think they're more expensive, but you can also get, if you've got the right audience, they can actually be more fruitful. So it's a bit of a double-edged blade, but it can be a source of quite interesting engagements.
Great, thank you. And I think that leads us nicely on to, as Brendan said, thanking Sarah and Teresa for their time today on the webinar, and thank you for taking all those really interesting questions.
Pleasure. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. It's been a really interesting session, and thank you so much for joining. I appreciate I appreciate all the insights, Sarah, that you shared today, and Teresa, thank you so much for going through the Reclaim Social stuff. I think social media has got such a huge opportunity right now. I thought it was really interesting what you said at the beginning, Teresa, about a 4% increase in social media in April alone. I'd be really interested to see how that's continuing during lockdown. And I think that there must be so much opportunity right now for charities to embrace digital in ways that they haven't before. Actually reminds me of a session we had a couple of weeks ago. I think it was Roz, actually, who's on the call with us, who said, now is the time to learn. And I think that if you're going to, if you have any questions or any doubts about what it is that, how to use social or how to do digital or something like that, this is a fantastic time to start testing, as Sarah was saying and Teresa both reinforced. Now is the time to activate those lessons and, kind of upskill your team. It's my little rambling done, but thank you. Thank you to all our attendees. Thank you so much. Please stay safe. We're almost out of lockdown. We hope, touch wood. But in the meantime, we at Fundraising have a session tomorrow called Fundraising Live, where you can check out further ways to do digital fundraising and check out what the platform that we offer. And we also are using the URL that I put on the slides at the very beginning of the session. We will be putting these slides, recording and notes within a few days, ideally as quickly as possible. Anyway, with that, thanks everybody. Have a wonderful day.